was interesting when John called me and he said, oh, I just realised the LinkedIn seminar is on Midsummer's Day, and it made me think of you. Astrology, cosmos, stars and planets and midsummer. So he asked me if I'd come along and just give you a little bit of insight into Midsummer's Day and what that is, and also a little bit about how I use astrology, stars, planets in my work. So first of all, I think that, does everyone know that it was Midsummer's Day today? Possibly not. No. Well, we just had the solstice, the summer solstice, which you may know because everyone was, not everyone, but a lot of people were at Stonehenge celebrating the solstice, and then 3 days later we have Midsummer. And it's interesting that in a lot of Europe, in a lot of parts in Europe, people think that Midsummer is the same as the solstice, but there are actually 3 days difference. There are questions as to why this is. But it's maybe because of the changes in the calendar, that we have Julian days and Gregorian calendars that have been moved backwards and forwards. But I think one of the main things is that the actual solstice, which was on the 21st, and that is actually when the sun reaches its highest point. So it is the middle of the year, and we do know now that the evenings will start to get shorter, very slowly along the line. But the sun was actually appeared to stop in the sky at its highest point in the Tropic of Cancer. And then 3 days later, so today, it starts to appear to move to make its journey to the equator. And that then is on the solstice, the winter solstice, on the 21st of December, which is then, of course, the shortest day. And interestingly, 3 days after that, we have Christmas Eve, which is then celebrated, obviously, through the Christian calendar. But this was actually the time when the sun then started to, the days got lighter and lighter. So we've got the two of the days getting lighter, darker now, and then moving into December. And it's interesting about all the different celebrations that were going on throughout Europe, that were this middle magical point, the middle of the year, when people were celebrating. Also a kind of a sadness that the sun from now on was going to lose its strength. So a lot of bonfires were lit, a lot of dancing was going on. It was traditionally the night to night of magic and fairies and dancing to keep this energy going, and also to reflect on a personal level of the projects that you started, personal business projects, earlier in the year. Obviously the start of the year, the astronomical year, is the spring equinox, which is on the 20th or the 21st of March. And this kind of gets us into the spring and gets us ready for action. So this is kind of also another quarter yearly point where we reflect on what we've done, maybe fire things up again, look at projects that have maybe not gone the way we want to, and what we can do to help that along. And it's really interesting how so many cultures still celebrate this. They're also looking in some cultures at the Green Man, and even in the church, I've read about churches in London, the All Hallows churches, that actually celebrate by bringing roses and rose petals to each other, because this was also, the rose is the flower of June, also a popular month for getting married, June being one of the star months. And going back into his history, it's quite interesting that this was the time of the mead moon, or the honey moon, and that's actually where the word honeymoon has come from. And we all know that roses are very special for love and romance, so it was all kind of associated in that way, which is really interesting. And so I think for everyone, it's a shame that we've kind of lost touch with a lot of these cycles. We just go on through the year and don't even think. But this is actually a real time, because the sun is now in the astrological sign of Cancer, which is a water sign, and the sun is getting weaker, and that's the fire. So we are actually looking at the two elements of fire and water to blend them together, which is also the masculine and the feminine, and the dark, the light, and how we can use that for ourselves, to better ourselves as we go on through the year. So that was just some little interesting things about Midsummer. And I'm obviously in my work looking at astrological cycles, astronomical cycles, and helping people and businesses to actually connect with the cosmic tides. And I think most people think of astrology as just newspapers and columns, but actually there's a lot more to it. Astrology is an ancient science and wisdom. It's been used in business for centuries and by all sorts of people. most famously last century American magnate J.P. Morgan, who had a full-time astrologer, often said, millionaires don't use astrology, billionaires do. So that was one of his statements, and as I said, he had a full-time astrologer. More recently, Anita Roddick used astrology in all of her work when she was launching a new product, or just getting the feel of the cosmic tides. And I often say to clients, it's like, you know, you wouldn't set sail in your boat against the tide, you would actually wait for the tide to be with you. So this is actually looking at the cosmos and seeing what kind of a cycle you are in, whether it is a cycle for growth and expansion, or actually whether it's a cycle for reflection and looking at foundations and building. So through connecting, we can actually find this out. At the moment, people have been asking me, what's the forecast astrologically for the economy? It's pretty difficult. We've got a lot of very challenging aspects coming up. I don't think we need astrology to tell us that now. We're in a very different cycle now that started 3 years ago, just before the bank crash. Planetary-wise, this was the planet Pluto entering Capricorn, and a year or so later, people said, oh well, you know, surely it's over now, we're on the up. But this cycle is going to be in force until 2024. So it is a long cycle. That doesn't mean it's going to be doom and gloom the whole way, but it does mean, and I see this as that the whole of the economy has to be restructured. You know, the way banks were bailed out and everything hasn't worked, and here we are again a few years later in the same position really, and it could actually be worse. And it's interesting now that newspapers, magazines are actually picking this up. Time magazine last week said, you know, what recovery? It's not a recovery at all. You know, so there's still a lot of work to be done. And this summer, astrologically, we've just had 2 eclipses. There was one last week, which you may have seen. I was actually in Germany, we could see it really well. I don't know if you can see it here in England. But we have another one on the 1st of July, which brings in all of these other planets. And so, you know, astrologers are actually wondering, what is this going to do? Because there's a lot of change, and we already know the climate around the world. There's a lot of seeking rebellion, liberation. People are fed up with the way things have been and they want change. So we are seeing this more and more now. And the way the planets are lined up at the moment does actually indicate that there might be some I think there will be some difficult times ahead. And then in August we've got some other really difficult planetary setups around the 9th and 10th. So I'm holding my breath that it's not going to be too difficult. But 3 years ago when I gave a business talk and talked about Pluto, Capricorn, the demise of the establishment, banks, government, a lot of people thought, what is she on about? And of course 3 months later people then knew what I was talking about. And that's not to say, oh, I made this wonderful prediction. It's just that that's the way we saw it, the story of the cosmos that is telling us that we do need to change. And we need to find a different business model and do things differently, which I think is perfectly well shown in the networking, in the LinkedIn, in the way we work now. The way we are doing business has got nothing to do with the way business was done years ago. Everything is changing, everything is moving. So we're actually looking towards doing things in a very different way. And I think it's about helping our fellow man, about community, not only just looking out for ourselves, but also spreading the word and supporting. And I do a lot of networking, particularly women's networking. And I feel that, you know, you go there not to make a deal, but actually to support and help the other people and to inspire them and help them with their ideas, which I think is a wonderful way of working, and that we could probably all aspire more to that in the new kind of business model, which I feel is very kind of prevalent now, and hopefully will continue to be so. So we may have difficulties to get through, but hopefully that we will. Just one question, there's been a lot in the papers recently about solar fire and solar flames. I don't know if anybody's picked up on it, which I think, if we had a huge solar fire, or what would happen to all our computers and everything? That's a bit of a question, isn't it?
They'd go pop, and we'd all be able to then talk to each other, wouldn't we?
I think, and again, that kind of reminds us that we mustn't just go down one route. We've got to keep everything balanced.
Yeah.
And that's really important, that we don't just focus on one thing, but we keep everything open.
Excellent.
That's important.
Well, thank you, Christine.
Okay.
Perfect timing. 9 minutes 45 seconds. Well done. Thank you.
Questions? Very well.